believed that they were scrubbing. And so at that point, he said, I forget the exact quote, it's pretty dire, but he said that we're embarking on a scientific expedition, the likes of which we cannot understand. And so starting in 58, they started to devise ways to control the carbon dioxide problem, right, and the pollution problems. And by the 60s, they were already experimenting with geoengineering. And, there are some obvious, geoengineering programs where they did cloud seeding and tried to create floods to flood out the Ho Chi Minh Trails in Vietnam, and they did all this other stuff. But they really started chemtrailing probably in the 70s.
Yeah.
And you can actually, it's in the book, but you can actually see, I put in a chart where you can see when it happened, because you can kind of see the temperature is rising, and it just falls. Meanwhile, the amount of light getting to the surface of the earth falls at the same time. And then it kind of gets spiky. And some of those spikes are caused by, volcanic eruptions or, things happening. But in general, it actually, the temperature of the earth actually decreased. And that was because of the geoengineering. And they really started the geoengineering in the 70s. And, now, because there's more population, there's more coal-fired plants, there's more cars, there's more over-industrialization, there's more pollution. Well, now they're kicking it up even more, So that's why you're noticing it more and more and more. But it's called global dimming. And the surface of the earth is actually darker than you remember.
Oh, yeah.
That is a truism.
Oh, yeah. And it's noticeably. And I notice it. And not just me, even one of my kids, well, he's in his mid-20s, noticed it and said, "Hey, Dad, it seems like,
right.
It seems like it's 5 o'clock and it was like 12 o'clock. That's the light difference." And, the young people don't realize it because, they grew up with what's going on.
They didn't see it.
Yeah, but I remember I go out when I was a kid. You go out at 1 and 2 o'clock, it was so bright, it hurt your eyes. And you could... And now it's like you go out at 12 or 1 o'clock, it feels like it's starting to be evening time.
Well, and at the same time, the other correlation that I found that I can't prove in a court of law, but what appears in the graphing is that at the same time that the temperature starts to decrease, that things get darker, which is an indicator that the geoengineering is in fact taking place. The rates of things like Alzheimer's and the things like autism and things like that start to go up. So, I don't know for sure that there's a causal effect, but it would appear based on timing and based on the graphs of when these things are taking place, that these other, these other forms of modifications to our brains, in the case of Alzheimer's, it's a buildup of aluminum in your brain is one of the causes. That appears to be correlate to these other events, which I find interesting, and it keeps increasing.
Yeah, and part of the stuff they use in this stuff has aluminum mixed into it, a compound, and it's really funny. My great grandfather owned a company. They used to make like big aluminum roasting pans, cast aluminum pans. And, and his company was doing really good. And then, before he died, he had Alzheimer's. And my great-grandmother had Alzheimer's. And then my grandmother had Alzheimer's. And my grandfather had it. And my father had it. And you know what they used? And I'm waiting for me to get it. Because you know what? Everybody used these aluminum roasting pans. My mother used it for almost cooking anything from making roast to chicken or whatever, almost a couple times a week. I grew up, and everything was in that big aluminum, roasting pan that you put in the oven. And that scares me. And just think about that, but it's being in the chemtrails has aluminum compound of sorts in it. And
right.
And I don't know, and I know it's affecting people. Look at what happened to Glenn Campbell, for example. And I'm just using his as an example because I already mentioned all my relatives, and I'm sure that the listeners out there have people out there that's suffering from dementia and Alzheimer's, and it's I hate to say it, is because the canned beer we drink, the sodas, the roasting pans, which you don't find many big roasting pans anymore made out of cast aluminum, because I mean that leached. Every time you cook something in it, that aluminum would leach right on into the meat, and you were eating it, absorbing
but
it.
But again, all these things play into the larger picture, and it all goes back ultimately to the depopulation argument. You know, that how do you kill a frog? Do you throw the frog in boiling water? Well, no, because if you throw the frog in boiling water, he's going to jump out. But if you put the frog in cold water and then heat the water slowly, then you'll boil him, because he'll never know that he's dying until it's boiled. It's the same kind of thing. That I don't think that you'll ever see the funeral pyres of 6.1 billion people. That's asinine.
No.
But what you will see is over time the population decreasing. There's more and more problems with fertility. That if you look at our water, right, that there's all kinds of chemicals in it. You know, there's there are things that medications that are used for menopause that are in it that mess with fertility. There's birth control medication in it. There's Valium. There's Soma, which is a muscle relaxant. There's all kinds of stuff in there. And can you argue that it's because you ingest, you pull your muscle and they give you some Soma to deal with the muscle pull, right? And then, you evacuate that eventually, or, you're a woman and you're taking birth control pills and you evacuate that, or, whatever you're taking Valium and you evacuate, it gets in the water system. It's not cleaned out properly. And then we ingest it. Well, maybe not. But what I know is that it's in there. And that by it being in there in the entire Western world, and pretty much most of Asia too, we're ingesting it, and it's causing fertility problems. It's causing the birth rates to decline across the entire world.
Well, that's what they want. That's what they want, though. They want it. That's the best way to do it. Kill off the population without them realizing what they're dying from.
Right, and they're just dying of old age. They're just not repopulating, and they die happy, and everybody's happy, and we're not having revolutions, and there's no fighting in the streets or anything else. We go to Safeway or Target and we buy our stuff, and whatever, and they get where they're going eventually. And I think part of the thing is that I think they're cruising toward that eventually, because whatever's going to happen, they think that 500 million is the survivable number, that could survive whatever's coming. Well, but I don't think it's going to happen tomorrow. I don't think it's going to happen in 10 years. I think it's a lot longer than that, because it's so slow. I think you're looking at 30 years, maybe. But it's so slow. But that doesn't mean that between now and 30 years it's going to be a picnic. But I've never bought into the whole, Agenda 21, they're going to walk down the street and just shoot people on the streets kind of thing. I don't buy that. But I do think that it'll happen eventually.
Well, what scares me, look what Nazi Germany did. If you were mentally inferior or you had emotional problem, in other words, you were a nutcase, yeah. You know what? They didn't put you in a hospital to try to treat you. I mean, they did before.
No, they executed you.
Yeah, they sent you to a camp and you were gassed or whatever, or put up next to a ditch and shot in the head, one of the two.
Well, you didn't. There was a whole long list of things. You were gay, or you didn't agree with their policies, or, they had a whole laundry list of reasons to kill people. I mean, they just wanted to kill everybody. I mean, you were Catholic, they wanted to kill you. I mean, they were nuts.
Oh yeah,
evil, nasty, sick shit.
Yeah, and they didn't trust each other. I mean,
no.
Yeah, I mean, and
but they were bonkers to begin with. I mean, they actually believed that their eugenics programs would create the Ubermensch, the Superman, and they had an entire eugenics program that was designed by scientists to try to create Supermen. I mean, it's absurd. The whole thing's absurd.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know. I actually, there's a lady out of North Carolina, Mary Joyce, who runs a reporting UFO Bigfoot reporting center out there. And, she was on my show here, I think the last time, and she kept saying, well, Germany might have lost the war, but they rule the world. And I she kept saying that. And then after the show got over with, you start thinking about weird things, like Admiral Byrd going up in 1947 up to Antarctica, all the weird things that happened there, his diary, supposedly diary, and all that stuff. It makes you wonder, what's going on and who's ruling all the governments. I mean, I'm not saying Germany is ruling it, but I think there's certain people, that are running all the governments.
Well, I mean, I've always maintained that, and I know it sounds insane. I was actually listed on Cracked.com as one of the 5 most insane conspiracy theories that's believable, for my theory that they actually left and went to Venus. But I believe that they packed up, that at least a bunch of them packed up and went to Venus. I have a lot of reasons for believing that, but I think they left and went to Venus. And I think some of the Star Wars stuff that's up in orbit, I think is actually not so much to shoot at each other, because I think we're all in cahoots. We have these dust-ups, but in reality, the Russians and us and the Chinese and the Europeans and the Pan-Asians, I think that they're really, we're all in this together. It's just we need the flare-ups and the problems to destabilize us, to keep us settled while they have bigger things to do. But, well, I'll give you a great example. I think I mentioned this the last time I was on, but you look at the Benny and Barney Hill story, which is incredibly famous, right?
Oh, yeah.
Well, in the original hypnotic regression that they did, Barney Hill talks about when the UFO landed that he had actually shot at it with a .45. He had a Colt .45 in the car, and he opened fire on it, and he ran out of bullets. And so they take him aboard, and he said that the crew was dressed in black jumpsuits with silver piping, and they had peaked caps. And he said it reminded him of Nazis, because he was in World War II, and the black jumpsuits and the peaked caps were kind of indicative of SS Panzer crews. And when he was led through the UFO, that he was led through by a red-headed Irishman with a German Shepherd. And everybody was like, why a red-headed Irishman? That makes no sense. Until you think about the fact that the IRA, the Irish Republican Army, when they were fighting the English in Northern Ireland, they actually allied themselves with the Nazis, and that they had sent large numbers of people from the IRA back to Berlin to be trained, and that the Nazis were actually supplying them with weapons.
Oh, yeah.
And they were close enough to the point that it wasn't very large, but the IRA actually fielded a unit that fought in the SS. They were SS infantrymen, and it was Irish. So the idea that there's a red-headed Irishman with a German Shepherd on board a UFO actually makes sense in that context. And the other thing that I always found shocking was the star map, the Marjorie Fish star map. Here's a star map that supposedly shows where the aliens are from, and they're from Zeta Reticuli and whatever. But in reality, if you look at the map, at the center of the map is the Earth, and then radiating out from the Earth is all these other places. Well, when you look at how people do things, number one, if they're aliens, their map may make absolutely no sense to us because they think in an alien way, and they don't think like a human. See, all these things that we think about aliens and what they do and what their motivations are not necessarily accurate because we're approaching from a humanistic point of view. Well, that's what I would do. Well, the problem is they're not you. They're something completely different. So the way they see things and perceive things would be radically different than the way you do because they're not from the Earth. And so the idea of them putting the Earth as the center of a map makes no sense. That they would put wherever they're from